Well, here's something you don't see every day on the Apostle P channel. It looks like a massive 3-pound overbuilt tactical folder, custom variety. Stay tuned, guys. We're going to have to talk about this one a little bit. Hi gang, Rob here. It's the evening of 23 March 2014. Part 2 of this week's Guest Blade series, courtesy of my subscriber Corey. You might remember a couple days ago we had a short 45-minute or so review of the Chris Reeve Umnumzan, and I told you there was a surprise coming. This is the surprise. It is the Direware Solo V4 or version 4 from custom knife maker Eric Tullis. And guys, this is the first one of these I've ever handled. And if you've been sort of paying attention, you know that I am not a huge fan of the modern overbuilt tactical folder flipper variety. I've been known to make fun of knives like this for their lack of real-world utility and their ridiculously expensive price tag. The Solo V4, depending on how you have it made, $1,600 to $1,900, I guess. Yeah, $1,600 to $1,900, and that's a lot of money. A lot of money for a user. I guess not a lot of money for a collector of really expensive knives, but that's not me. So I'm kind of excited to have an opportunity to get to know this thing, to look at it, to fondle it, to flip it. Because I'll probably never own one. I thought you guys would like to see it. So what do we have here? Before I get into impressions, let's just talk about the nuts and bolts, so to speak. We do have a titanium frame lock tactical folder. This titanium is sort of an OD/bronze anno, very fine orange peel finish. And that is on the lock side, a gorgeous titanium pocket clip. Maybe my favorite thing about the knife is this clip. Beautiful, mounted on standoffs. Does act maybe as a little bit of an over travel stop for the lock bar. On the show side, we've got a 3D machined, like almost a concealed carry pattern, just gently curved, a little bit thinner on the sides than it is in the middle. It's a very low void or no void carbon fiber, really pretty. Kind of done in a satin finish, not really a high polish. Very attractive. Goes very well with the rest of the knife. The construction of this handle before we get to the blade is pretty cool. And what I see is some really nice machining. Notice behind the stop pin, it's got those 5 tiny little holes that really flow well with the drilled hole for the D-tap ball and the 4 little slots milled into the lock bar that give you just a point of tactile contact when disengaging the lock bar. And those holes also go well with the cuts in the flipper. See if you can see those. Beautifully thin lock bar cutout, isn't it? Just gorgeous. And I love the face of this lock bar, how it only makes contact right in this little run of flat. And if you notice, let me close the blade. See if I can get you a shot of the lock face. Yeah, look down in there. There it is. very small run of contact, which makes the lockup really positive. No up and down play, no side to side. Knife does run on ball bearings, not sure what type. I don't see an IKBS identification anywhere on it. Here's the dimensions, guys. Handle length, and I think maybe each one of these is going to differ a little bit. I did some fairly precise measurements on this knife, and they're a little different than what's published on the Direware website. The handle length on this thing is 5 1/16 inches. Blade length is 3.4 inches. Handle thickness about 5/8 of an inch. Blade thickness, I measure this less than 180 thousandths, but their website will say 180 to 190. So about 3/16. I think it's down closer to, maybe 170 thousandths on this particular knife, which is fine. See if we can catch the markings on the blade. You'll see the Direware name engraved into the blade tang, and up around the stop pin, the open stop pin, you should be able to make out M390, which is the blade steel for this knife. Remember, if you guys watched my Nums on video, I was kind of whining about the lack of points of positive contact. Not true on the Direware Solo. We've got 5, count 'em, 5 machined standoffs with beautiful fasteners. No threads in the titanium frame itself. It uses these beautifully machined female cups. And I would imagine that these standoffs are shouldered into the titanium and the carbon fiber. Don't know that for sure because I'm not taking this $1,700 knife apart to find out. Fasteners are all Torx. Even the custom pivot doesn't look like a custom pivot, but it is. Definitely machined in-house. In fact, about the only machining error I could find on this knife was a very, very faint tool chatter on the male side of the pivot. I don't know if the light will pick it up, but it's very slight. You really have to sort of look for it to see it. The pivot, though, and I'm not sure I'll be able to get any light through here to show you, but although the pivot looks pretty substantial from the heads, it's actually really kind of small. Let me see if I can get the light to shine through there for you guys. Not very big, pretty small diameter pivot and a small diameter set of bearings. The closed stop pin is internal. It is shouldered, but it's not fastened with any screws. What appear to be thumb studs, and in Direware's pretty sketchy literature about this knife, or at least some of the advertisements at some of the custom knife sites, talk about these being thumb studs that can easily be used to deploy the knife, and neither Corey, the owner, nor I have ever been able to get the knife to open using these things that are not thumb studs. My buddy Josh, local guy here in the Fort Wayne area, did get it to open once while he was here one night, but I can't get it to open. So it's pretty much a flipper only knife. And it does flip well, but it takes a little technique, I've got to tell you. What I can tell you is this: if you have any pressure at all on this lock bar with like your middle finger, you know, if you had it held in a pretty natural position, that's where your fingers would be, you'll not get that knife to, oh, I guess I must have just moved my finger enough. But here, I'm going to put a little pressure. It might as well be locked. I can't make it flip. If I pull my grip up above the lock bar on the fixed part of the frame, it almost flips like the detent is too easy. Very odd. I've noticed by looking inside the knife, I don't know if you can see this, but I think you can. That detent ball is very small in diameter, as is the hole in the blade. I don't know if I can rotate that to a point you can see it or not. Actually, the hole in the blade is much bigger. There it is. The hole in the blade is quite a bit bigger than the ball, so there's no play when the knife is closed. I gotta believe that almost half of that ball is exposed. You know, it must bury almost to the equator of the ball. Because man, if you get in the wrong position, you get the pressure in the wrong position on that knife, you can't flip it. I backed it up a little bit and then it just, you know, sort of I'm actually better with this knife after a few days than it looks like on camera, but it's just very odd. The pressure you put on that lock bar so affects how the knife flips. If you're not pressing on it, it actually takes a little bit of strategy on the flipper. The other thing that's a little odd in operation, if you use like a normal method of disengaging the lock, you know, just cradling it in your hand, putting your thumb where you think it ought to be, and you know, move the blade with your finger, let go with your thumb. About half the time that happens to you. You're not clear of the detent ball. You really can't close the knife. It feels like you're going to snap the ball out of the frame by trying. You almost have to hold the knife vertically, get way back on that lock bar, almost to this point at the back of the choil, and let it fall on your thumb. And if you have your thumb back far enough, it'll clear the ball and close. Interesting. I'm going to come back to that as we wrap up and talk about this blade a little bit. This is a blade style that I don't generally love. You know, it's a pretty broad blade, but the primary bevel, which is a hollow ground bevel, in both the main grind and in the sort of modified tanto point, you know, it starts at about half the breadth of the blade, which, you know, if you're starting from 180 thousandths coming down to 10 or 15 thousandths in just about, what, 5/8 of an inch, that gives you a pretty steep grind. You know, by design of grind, this knife's not going to be a slicer. However, I must say this, I think this is Direware's factory edge on this knife, and although it doesn't look very consistent in its breadth, and it's not, it's kind of at the mercy of the main grinds of the knife, it's very sharp. I mean, it's very sharp. Let's see how it cuts. And guys, I have not touched this. It is the factory edge. Let's just see. I don't think I've done this yet. It's going to present a little bit of a challenge with that big recurve. But, you know, that snag was right when it hit the point. It's not bad. Not bad at all. That's Natchez Shooter Supply catalog paper, which is limper than phone book paper, I think. That's a pretty good edge. So, you know, for $1,700 at least you get a good edge. But this blade, you know, is not a slicer. It's not a whittler. It's a, well, if it weren't $1,700, it'd be a pretty good, strong, hard-use tactical knife. It's suitable for prying. You know, you've got all this flat that runs almost out to, what, within darn near a half an inch of the tip. Full stock thickness, clear to here. You know, can you stick that in a skid and break it down? You bet you can. Are you going to do that with a $1,700 knife? No. Did I mention the weight, by the way? The website lists this at like 9.4, 9.25 ounces, depending on where you look. I actually measure this at 8.7. Maybe that's a function of the carbon fiber scale versus G10. I don't know for sure. But still, 8.7 ounces for a 3.5 inch blade. It's kind of crazy. And my buddy Toad Sticker, he likes to mention a fact that most of us don't like to think about, especially most of us who are into the overbuilt folders. Knife is only as strong as its weakest point. And what's the weakest point on this thing, do you think? Well, I think there are two places that are a little weak. One is that pivot, again, just not very large in there. And the other one is the lock bar. They do, if you're going to run a thin lock bar cutout, you probably ought to put your cutout on the outside, and they did here. So you've got full strength running on the inside of the bar. But it's very thin, and it takes very little effort to disengage. Good thing you've got that pocket clip there acting as an over travel stop, because it's very little tension. You know, it's kind of a paradox, isn't it? You've got all these overbuilt features, 5 standoffs, big thick titanium slab, big thick carbon fiber scale on the show side, which, by the way, is a little thicker than the titanium, a little bit odd for the eye. Big thick blade stock, although not as thick as some. What appears to be a big pivot, and then we've got this sort of little kind of spongy, not confidence-inspiring lock bar. So, you know, let me get the negatives out of the way before I sort of end this review with some positive. This knife, and many like it, are not super duty folding knives that can take the place of a fixed blade. You know, if you're a soldier or a tactical operator of some kind, or just a tradesman who's in the outdoors and uses his folding knife hard, that's not this knife, and it's not, you know, it's not many knives like this. What these are they're trendy collectibles, aren't they? They're the 2012-2013 Rage. For guys who spend most of their time flipping their knives while making forum entries, or even serious collectors who see the historical significance of this knife and appreciate the fine machining. You know, sort of a really, really nice item to have sitting at your desk. Definitely first class materials, though. Definitely first class machining. And the finishing is pretty darn good. Don't know what this coating is. Corey, if you're available, you might want to help us with that. I couldn't find it, and I didn't. If it was in your email, I missed it. Yeah, I'm getting the hang of it a little bit, huh? Pretty cool blade. Not sure if I'm ever going to own one. This might be the first and last time I ever get to handle a Direware. I sure do like that side. Interesting too, a custom knife with a variable position pocket clip. It mounts tip up right hand and tip down right hand. That's what these two screws are, just placeholders. They'll go in either location if you move the clip. And I can't really find anything wrong with this knife for what it is. The lockup is rock solid. The ergonomics are a little odd. Let me put this back in my right hand. It likes the hand to be, you know, sort of perpendicular over the handle. And this jimping I originally thought was like useless because it's so far forward. It's not. That's kind of right where your thumb wants to be, which obviously doesn't give you much of a thruster. If you pull back to here, your hand's in kind of an uncomfortable position. I guess it's more of a utility knife than a defensive blade, actually, in reality. Hammer grip isn't bad. This big old flipper / finger guard does get in the way and dig you a little bit. That's not bad. The draw cut, that's not going to happen. That flipper will eat the web of your hand. And let's see, reverse grip. Not bad. Not sure that you'd use it because, again, I don't see this being a fighting knife. But a great artistic expression, and one that exhibits great machining and finishing skill. Got to give you that, Eric. This one's going to be on its way back home tomorrow, but I just thought you guys would like to look at it. I don't fully understand knives like this, so I don't want to be too critical. It might just be that I'm not familiar with what I'm looking at. But I'm pretty sure I'd be happier with a $400 Sebenza than a $1,700 Direware. There are people who would be more happy with a $100 Spyderco than a $400 Sebenza, however, and I get that too. Well, off you go, little girl. Grace to you and peace, my friends, from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, the word is sharp.